My goal here is not to go over all the exact numbers, spawn curves, and coding into enemy spawn mechanics, but to give you a general idea of what affects spawning and how to understand enemy cap so you can improve your gameplay. So let's get into it. The first thing to understand is power. Every moon has a maximum indoor and nighttime enemy power cap. Each entity has a specific power which ranges from values 1 to 3, and each enemy has a max number that can spawn. For example, Rend has a max indoor power of 10 and a max nighttime power of 6. Eyeless dogs take up 2 power each, so if you notice you have 3 eyeless dogs on Rend, you know a giant or worm cannot spawn because you have fulfilled the max nighttime power. However, if you kill a dog, baboon hawk, or giant, for example, this could free up space for a different nighttime enemy to spawn. Additionally, the maximum number of eyeless dogs that can spawn is 8, so if you manage to kill 8 eyeless dogs, no more will spawn. This is especially true for Bracken. You cannot get a second Bracken after killing one because Bracken has a max spawn of 1. If you are getting a second Bracken, you or the host of the server you joined are running mods that indirectly mess with the gameplay. Something to note is that Ghost Girl counts as an indoor enemy. This all goes the same for indoor enemies. If you have a Bracken power 3 and a Thumper power 3 on Assurance, which has a cap of 6 indoor power, no more enemies can spawn until those entities are dead. Just to clarify, dead entities do not count towards max power, meaning killing the Assurance Bracken will free up 3 power. For information on specific moon and enemy power, refer to the Lethal Company wikis. I will link both of them in the description. Spawn cycles occur roughly starting at 7:40 a.m., then 9 a.m., then every 2 hours until 11 p.m. is a spawn cycle. All this really means is if you have a spawn cap at 11 a.m. and you don't kill any enemies until 1 p.m., you have missed out on all the enemies that tried to spawn during the 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. cycle. This can be a good or bad thing. For example, if you want a lot of nutcrackers on Rend, you probably don't want to miss out on spawns, and so you want to kill enemies. Also, spawn cycles have different amounts of enemies they try to spawn at different times. This varies from moon to moon. At the beginning cycles, not a whole lot of enemies spawn. For example, experimentation at 7:40 to 9 spawn cycle has -1 enemies that will spawn, meaning no enemies will spawn during that cycle. But the later cycles will increasingly spawn more enemies. What enemies will spawn during these cycles is determined by probabilities which can also be found on the wiki. But, for example, you are more likely to get a nutcracker to spawn on Rend because it is almost a 26% chance, where on experimentation you might never see a nutcracker because it is a less than 1% chance. I will not be mentioning daytime outdoor spawn cycles. All you really need to know is that beehives don't spawn past 7:40, the initial game load up time. Nighttime enemies have the ability to start spawning around 12 to 12:30 p.m., but vary slightly between moons. There are 2 confirmed things that affect spawns: pulling apparatus and eclipsed weather. Pulling apparatus has a 70% chance to set the minimum entity spawn to 2 per cycle. Eclipsed weather also raises the minimum number of entities to spawn for each cycle. For example, eclipsed experimentation sets the minimum entities to spawn to 1, so you can actually get enemies during the 7:40 to 9 a.m. cycle. The information on screen is what the minimum will be set for each moon when it is eclipsed. One last important thing I need to mention is that all outdoor enemies rise from the ground when spawning, while all indoor enemies come from a vent. You can actually hear them spawning from the vent, as the vent will make this sound. If anything is unclear, please ask, and I will add answers to any questions to the pinned comment.